Okay, perfect. So let's go into the settings. Let's good. All right, I think we're good. All right, so let me just go ahead and go into Slack. Everyone, I let them know. Okay. Yeah. So I wonder if we can actually record this as well. All right, everybody. Welcome aboard. Today we will be reviewing the repeating with loops assignment for LC 101. Not really too much to say here, just going to be going through loops in JavaScript. If you have any questions or if you're just joining the chat, please just drop them in the chat. Hey, Antonio, what's going on, man? Glad to have you here. So, can you hear me, by the way? Can you just comment in the chat if you can or cannot? Let's see. Perfect. Okay. So we'll just be going through these 9 different sections today. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat and I will address them as soon as I see them. And thank you for coming by, Antonio. So, iteration. What is iteration? Essentially, it's us just cutting through, having to repaste the same code over and over again, and making it be a lot simpler. What that means is, let's say that we had to console log 20 different items. We'd have console log 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's not necessarily the most efficient way to do things. It's very repetitive, and it is also very error prone. What that means is if I do console.og, that's an error. If I do canol.log, that's an error as well. We run into the risk of also having incorrect variable names, which can happen. So what we're going to be talking through is iterating through a collection, a list, or a loop. So you've already kind of heard about this in class. It's a for loop. That is part of iteration. So what essentially it will do is repeated execution of a sequenced statement. So there are a total of 3 arguments that you can pass into a for loop. The beginning of a loop, the where to end the loop, and how to step through it. So we'll explore the details of the syntax shortly, but it's worth taking a moment to marvel at the simplicity of this program compared to the one above. So it might be a little confusing to see that this program uses integer 51, but only prints up to 50. Why this is the case will become clear in the next section. So this part is fairly simple. It's essentially telling you, hey, instead of console.logging, oh no, oh, the mouth from the south is here. What's going on, Danny Thompson? Thank you for joining us. So what iteration is essentially cutting back on doing 20 or 50 console.logs and being able to allow your loop to go through all 50 for you. Remember, dry. Don't repeat yourself. First up is for loops. It's the first JavaScript tool for iteration that we will explore. It's typically used for definite iteration. That means that you have a beginning and you have an end, and they are clearly defined. That could be a data set length or something similar. When a for loop begins, it can usually be determined to exactly how many times it will iterate. So here we have for let I equals 0. We're declaring I inside of our for loop and initializing it to 0. We're declaring the end here, 51, and then we're doing I++. I++ is the same as I equals I plus 1, in case you were curious about that. So this will print integers 0 through 50, one number per line. Simple enough. Well, we say that the loop has a data set of 0 through 50, yada yada, and its action is to print a value to the console. Let's break down the syntax piece by piece so we can understand for loops. So we have the initial expression, which we've already discussed is where we put I equals 0. The loop condition, which is I is greater than, less than, is that way to 51, and I++. Update expression is I equals I plus 1. So notice that the first line within parentheses is the initial expression, the loop condition, and the update expression. So let I equal 0 is executed exactly once at the beginning of the loop. The variable I is the loop variable. The Boolean expression is I is greater than 51. The condition is evaluated before each loop. If the condition is true, the loop will execute again. If the condition is false, I is less than 51. I don't know why I get those confused. If the condition is false, the loop will cease execution and the program moves on to the code below the loop. The statement I++ is the update expression. The expression is executed at the end of each loop. The block of code surrounded with the brackets is the loop body. The body is executed once for each iteration. The flow of execution for the for loop. So we'll break down some of the flow of execution for the loop that we've been looking at. So what it does is, and I'm going to actually start a new REPL so that we can do this side by side. And let's see if this will allow us to do so. And it won't because my stream software is wonky and it only lets me do one. But let's try doing this. Can I really not do these side by side in a stream? What? That seems so limited. Oh, that's probably why. No, it still didn't like that. That is weird. Oh, wait. There we go. Now we're cooking. Okay, can everyone see both screens? Yay or nay? Yeah, Danny. Digging back up an old horse and riding into town. Perfect. So we'll do embarrassed, clumsy training. Hey, that was me at the gym this afternoon. It is what it is. Perfect. So a for loop is simple enough. You have for let I equals 0, semicolon, I less than 51, I++, console.log I. And if we run this, you'll see that we get 0 through 50. Now, I see that. Okay, we got the D Thompson dev account on chat. That's what I'm talking about. So, can anyone tell us why we logged 0 through less than 51 and got 0 through 50? Just any thoughts on it? So the reason why we got, let me remove my ugly mug from there. The reason why we got 0 through 50 instead of 0 through 51 is because, remember, a lot of times when we're dealing with developing and programming in general, it is 0 based counting. So 0 is 1, 1 is 2, 2 is 3, yada yada. So that's how we started at 0, we made it to less than 51, and we ended up getting 0 through 50. So I really like this graphic here because it breaks it down a lot more simpler than I could. You initialize your expression, you declare your variable and initialize your loop. The condition is evaluated. So here I is equal to 0. Is I still less than 51? Then we'll do I++ and we'll just log I real quick. So here 0 is less than 51. So since this evaluated to true, it console logged 0 and then it added 1 to 0. Then we got 1, 2, etc. It continued to loop and update the expression and then check to see if it had evaluated to true at that point. At which point it then decided to stop at 50. So a for loop is fairly simple. Do we have any questions on that again? Let's see. All right, no questions on the for loop. That's what I'm talking about. So now we'll do iterating over collections. One of the most common uses for a for loop is to carry out a task once for each item in a collection. Yeah, I've noticed there's a weird delay thing. It's my first time streaming, so don't be too hard on me. I was honestly going to do this via Zoom, but I really wanted to try this. So that's kind of why I wanted to do this. And, won't learn until you get out of your comfort zone. So, iterating over strings, the following example prints each of the character of the string launch code on a separate line. So, can anyone tell me why iterating over a string would be considered iterating over a collection? Let's see. Yeah, don't give the answers, Danny. We know you know. We know you know, Mr. Google. Trust me, we know you know. All right, good stuff, good stuff. So, yes to Wilbur, yes to Antonio. A string is a collection, and it is a collection of characters in that exact order. So, launch code is a collection of the characters LAUNCHCODE in that exact order. Good stuff. So, this is fairly simple, and we can actually reproduce this ourselves. Let's do let name equals Danny Thompson. Simple enough. We'll begin our I at 0 because we want to start at the 0 index. I is less than name dot length I++. So would we do name dot length or name dot length minus 1? name.length plus 1, and y. Anybody have any ideas to that? All right, I'm going to keep going, but y'all, when the delay catches up to y'all, just answer it in the chat. So the reason why is because, remember, even though collections are 0 indexed, a lot of times the length won't be. All good, Wilbur, don't worry. So when we log this, we are actually not getting the correct answer. Can anyone tell me why we're getting numbers instead of each letter in Danny Thompson? And I'm assuming y'all have already hit an answer, so I'm just going to reply here. Because we're still only printing out I, which we declared up here, and we're doing I++. So what we need to do is we need to actually call in the name and the index of that. So when we hit play, we have Danny Thompson. And remember, a space is also considered a character in a string. There we go. Good stuff, good stuff. I knew y'all would catch up. All right, so since name.length is 10, the loop executes once for each value of I. For each of the values of I from 0 to 9, the loop body console.log name I will print name I, where name I is one of the character's names. So name I 0 would be the D, name I 1 would be the A, etc. So we're iterating through the index, which is of the string, which is being updated right here. All right, iterating over arrays. Now we've had some fun with multi-dimensional arrays, so I'm not going to get too deep into these, but I would just like to show y'all how to do this. So instead of name equals Danny Thompson, let's do let Memphis Legends equal, and I'm just going to list some of my favorite Memphian devs. Trust, by the time we're done here, y'all will be some of my favorite STL legends, so it is what it is. We have JC Smiley, amazing dev, huge potential, one of my bestest buddies around. We have the impeccable Lawrence. For the life of me, I can't remember his last name right now, but great developer. Started launch code and everything else with us. Love him to death. Simple enough. Now, it'll be very much the same as iterating through a collection because an array and a string are very similar. Lockhart, yes, Lockhart. Thank you for that, Danny. It's been too long since we've seen each other, honestly. So we will do here Memphis Legends .length, and here we will do Memphis Legends I. Be ashamed that yeah, you know what, Danny, you're right. I got to put some respect on that. My apologies. Don't show them the stream now. I don't want to get in trouble. So now when I run through, you'll see that it's going through each iteration, through each iter, and printing out what's there. So let's actually also log I. And remember, even though it's not a hard and fast rule for JavaScript, it is a good habit to get into closing out your code with the semicolon. When we get to Java and other pieces, it will be very, very useful for you. So just throwing that out there. And let's just run this. So you see 0 index is Danny, first index is JC, second index is Lawrence Lockhart. So fairly simple enough there. Similar to the string example, it loops 4 times. Here it loops 3 because we only have 3. But you know what? Let's add here Walker Lori. All right, now you guys saw that, right? The cool thing about loops is they will be dynamic, and in this instance, even more so. In Did Danny just say something nice? I'm gonna have to save this recording. Honestly, he's never said anything nice about me, so I'm gonna have to save this recording. But so essentially, what we're going with here is we've iterated through each and every item. We have the index, we have the value that belongs in the index, and it's just going to continue doing that. Let's look through the try it. Write a program that prints the name of each member of your family on a different line, creating an array variable containing the names. I already have right here. That's my family. Yeah, trust me, it hurt me to call you family too, man. At this point, you're my annoying older brother, though. And here we have a for loop that prints each name on a different line along with the index. So without even realizing it, we're already doing the practice exercises. Simple enough. And all of these exercises are meant to build upon one another, especially when it comes to the homework, when it comes to your final projects. So just keep that in mind. We'll go ahead and go to breaking down the for statement. Yeah, you know you're still family, man. So breaking down the for statement. Having seen several examples, we'll now explore the syntax of a for loop in more depth. Go ahead, Danny. Thank you for popping in. I appreciate you. First example of a for loop that we looked at is here, which is what we've already done. We broke down the flow of execution on this loop, noting that each loop executes once for each of the value of I from 0 to 50. We have three components: our loop variable, we have our loop condition and update expression, which dictate exactly how it operates. So far we've only seen for loops with this exact form. The anatomy, which we've already discussed, is initial expression, loop condition, and update expression. Initial expression is executed once before any iterations of the loop. It can be any expression, even empty. However, it almost always declares and initializes a variable. So almost always you will do let I equals a number. Then here you will do I is greater than or equal to a number.length or a fixed number. I'm personally not a fan of these statically typed out, so I prefer to store a variable and then do variable.length or something similar, but that's just my personal experience. So as we continue, let's initialize I at 2 and print. So now it only printed out Lawrence Lockhart and Walker Lorry. Since we initialized I at 2, it ignored Danny and JC, which is a true crime here, and went straight for Lawrence and Walker. If we initialize it at 1, it just ignores Danny altogether. Okay, so to avoid confusion and bugs, you should give your loop variable a unique name, one that you haven't used anywhere else in your program. In case where the loop variable is serving as a counter for iterations of a loop, it is conventional to use I for the variable name. In case of nested for loops, the variables j, k, etc. are often used. All right, Antonio Watkins wants to know, can you put a variable on the I++? What do you mean, Antonio? Talk to me. Or I guess ping me. I'm not sure what the appropriate lingo would be here. Because remember, I++ is technically already a variable, which is right here. This is just adding 1 to our variable, which we've already defined here. Does that make sense, or were you thinking of something else? Is it possible to have an input from a user there? Possible? Yes. Practical? Maybe not as practical, but definitely possible. Fun thing about coding, anything's possible. The question isn't, can we do something? It's more, should we do something? So let's do this. What is it? Const, help me out here. require, no, const input equals, someone help me out here with the syntax. Wow, I've legitimately forgotten how to ask for const input equals require read line sync. That's what it was. Wilbur Reed, thank you very much. Const input equals require. And this is where we get back to that point that we were discussing earlier. Don't be afraid to Google syntax. Really don't be, because it happens to everyone. So here we'll do, okay, we've asked the question. Input equals require dot question. And here we will do, where are we starting? And you know what? Let's actually, would we have to initialize a bunch of these? I wonder if we would have to initialize a bunch of these to even try it. Might be spaghetti code, but we'll try it. So input 2, and input 3. And what we'll do here is, okay, Wilbert, I like your idea. Let's try it. So let Q1 equals input dot question. Where are we starting? Let Q2 equals input dot question. Where are we ending? And let Q3 equals input dot question by how much are we counting?
let's do here. Okay. Can y'all hear me now? Perfect. So sorry about that. My headset died on me, so it is what it is. We'll just continue on going. So the question that I was asking here was, if I plus plus adds 1 to I, what does I minus minus do? Decrement. Good. So instead of adding 1, it'll subtract 1. Excellent call. So, good stuff, good stuff. All right, so checking our understanding, let phrase equals launch codes LC101, let I equal 0, I is less than phrase.length minus 1, I is equal to I plus 3, console.log phrase I. So how many times does the loop body execute? So I equals 0 means that we're starting at 0. As long as I is less than the phrase length minus 1, so our phrase length will be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So 18 minus 1 is 17. And I is equal to I plus 3. That means we're going to be incrementing by 3. So how many times does 17 go into 3? 19. That's phrase.length minus 1. Or did I miscount? LAUNCHCODE apostrophe S LC, no, 101 space. Yeah, it's 18. Okay, Wilbert, you scared me, man. Yeah, so it'll go in 5 times. So the loop itself will execute 5 times. And the best part is, we don't have to live in suspense of, did we get that right or wrong? We can always just copy, paste, and run. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Huh, now that's peculiar. So it went... Oh, I see where we messed up. And this is a good thing to remember. We're initialized at 0, so we have to include 0. So even though 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15 will be hit, which is why we have N, C, E, etc., we will always get that L since we initialize at 0. So yeah, you were right, Antonio. My bad, my bad. So question number 2. Which set of characters is printed by the loop? We've placed characters for the choices below on the same line, but they will be printed on separate lines. So LNCE 1. And the reason being, we're iterating through the 5 characters that are being selected, but we're also remembering that we're printing out that first one. Okay. So now we're moving on to the accumulator pattern. The accumulator pattern is simple enough. It just accumulates items. This is if you're iterating through a collection to try to determine what pieces you need. This would accumulate those pieces and hold them for you to manipulate at a later time. So, commonly used approach to solve a group of similar programming problems. So, adding 1n. We'll write a program that adds up the integers 1 to n, where n is an integer variable that we create. If we're to do this on a pen and paper, it will be a formula where it will be a single formula and compute the answer. For example, n equals 6 would be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus 6. To get the result, we would first add 1 and 2 to get 3, then 3 plus 3 to get 6, then 6 plus 4 to get 10, 10 plus 5 to get 15, 15 plus 6 to get 21. So we can do the same math in a loop. So let n equal 0, let total n equal 6, let total equal 0. And for every I, we will do increment I and then add whatever the value is to it. So just starting from scratch, let n equal, and let's say that we're doing this 12 times, just so we can be original. Let total num equal 0. We don't want any existing values there. And then for let I equal 0, I is less than or equal to n, greater than or equal to n, I plus plus. Then here we'll do total plus equals I. And then console.log the total. Okay. So total is not defined, and this is because I changed up the variable, so that should have been total num. Total is not defined. Yep, missed it again. Total num. Boom. So 78. The reason why we're doing plus equals, so plus plus will add 1. Minus minus will decrement by 1. Plus equals will add our existing total number to the variable that is on the right hand side, this being I. So this is the same as doing 1 plus 1 plus 2, well, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12. And if we change this back to 6, we'll see that it's essentially the same problem, and we should still get 21, which we do. All right, variable total is initialized at 0. Loop executes once each for the values of I from 1 to 6. Each time the loop body executes, the next value of I is added to the total. So same as 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus 6. The only step that's different here is that we use the variable total to keep track of the running total. So, and this is a good thing to note out, we declared total num outside of the loop, and we are adding to total num. Reason being, we actually want to print that out. If we had declared total num in here and never declared it up here, we would never print anything out. And let's do this. Let total num equals 0. Total num plus equals I. When we run this, you'll see how we get this total num is not defined. Remember, a variable, once declared, will live inside of the loop that it's declared. If you want to actually use it anywhere else in the code, you'll want to declare it global or above wherever you usually do this. So, boom, now we run. How peculiar. Oh, derp. And this is why it's important to keep track of your variable names. Forgot the capital case N. Now when we run, runs with no problem. Now, reversing a string. This is where we get to the fun stuff. Is anyone left in the chat, by the way? All right, so I'll just continue with what I'm doing. So Some programming languages do have a string method that will reverse a given string, but JavaScript doesn't. We'll write our own program that can reverse a string. Simple enough. So we'll initialize two variables. Okay, both of y'all are here. I'll never forget this. So let str equals sample, and let reversed equals null. We'll start it off as blank. Here, reversed is our accumulator variable, so whatever we go for, we will actually store in reversed. Simple enough. Our approach is to reversing the string will be to loop over str, adding each subsequent character from the beginning to the end of the str to the reversed. What I mean by that is if we have BLUE, we will do sample equals B, sample equals, since B is already existing, it would be sample plus L, and that would read out sample equals LB. Simple enough. And this is a fairly simple way to do this, so we'll just go ahead and knock it out. So for let I equal 0, I greater than str dot length, I plus plus, and here we'll do reversed equals str I plus reversed. And then here we will do console.log reversed. Now when we run, we have elpmas. Weird, but not unheard of. We will also have palindromes, which are always fun to do, like taco cat, which is taco cat backwards. Fun little note there. So if here we actually do a console.log for stri, you'll see that it went through taco cat backwards, and if we do sample, you'll see that it went through sample, but they're all appended to the end. So that's why we have elpmas. Before I continue, do we have any questions, comments, or concerns? All right, I will continue into the summing an array, but if y'all do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I will address them as soon as I see them. Another common, okay, Antonio has one in all the other examples. All right, what you got for us, Antonio? I await with a bated breath. Console.log was inside of the for loop. Why is it outside here? Okay, so the reason why console. You're talking about this one on line 10, correct? Okay, so the reason why console.log is outside of this is because, remember, as we go through this, we are stepping through whatever variable we put right here, and then we're appending them to this universal variable that we have. So this universal variable, while it can be accessed in here, it wouldn't really make much sense, because when we do this, and we log that out, it will print every time for everything that's done. So here you have S, S, A, SA, M, SAM, P, SAMP, L, SAMPL, and E, SAMPLES. So essentially what will happen here is we'll print it out for every iteration of the loop. And if we're just curious about the end result, we don't necessarily have to worry about this. We only have to print it out outside of the loop when it's finished running. Remember, this code ties back to our discussion we had on your code will run from top to bottom. So if you have your end stuff, it will always tend to be near the bottom. If you're declaring variables, it will tend to live near the top so that you don't have this place where both crash or you don't print out a bunch of stuff that you don't need to print out. Does that make sense? And if this is not making sense, please let me know, because I can definitely find better ways to phrase this. I'm just kind of nervous. First time streaming and all that. All right. Let's go ahead and go into while loops. Also, anything in the loops. What do you mean, Wilbert? Oh, believe me, when we get down to the end, there will be questions. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Now we have, I was just further explaining what you were saying. Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, we can discuss that later on during office hours or in class, but I get what you were talking about. My apologies. All right. So while loops, it's a construct for iteration, the while loop. It provides a much more general mechanism for iterating, like a for loop. It will use a condition to determine whether it should continue executing, but it does not have an initial and an update expression. What that means is this loop will always execute at least once, I believe. I believe while loops will always execute at least once, which is their initial, then it will continue. I might be wrong on that though, so grain of salt there. So a while loop will continue to repeat as long as its Boolean expression evaluates to true. The condition typically includes a variable or a value or variable that is updated within the loop, so that the expression eventually becomes false. Do while does at least once. So yes, while loops will generally execute at least once in most programming languages. There are a handful of exceptions, but they're rare enough that you won't really touch on them too much or see them too much. So we can visualize the flow of execution of a while loop as follows. And this is where we would get more into what you were discussing of having variables on the inside. So let's do while I is less than 50. And here we will do let I equals 0. And then I plus equals 2. And here we could try to run this, but since we have not defined I here, we would have to declare that first. So You see here you have to declare it at the top. So let I equal 0. I meant a do while. Oh, do while. Oh, okay. You weren't asking. You were telling me do whiles execute at least once. Correct. And yeah, I might be wrong on that. You might be correct. I might be mixing my while with my do while, which is a general crash that a lot of developers tend to have. So here we can run this, and you'll see that it didn't print out anything because I didn't tell it to. So let's do console.log I. If the condition is initially false for a while, it will just pass the loop. Correct, Wilbert. Man, you're ahead of the curve here. You sure you shouldn't be teaching this? And oh, that's why. I forgot to undeclare this in the beginning, so it accidentally threw me into an infinite loop. Let's try running that again. Nope, still in that infinite loop. Well done. What on earth is going here? Let's try I++. And let's do this. And now let's try running that. Did my REPL freeze up? Yeah, you might be right. Let's try running that. Let's try. There we go. So, yeah, my REPL just needed to be clear. Thank you for that, Antonio. I'm assuming that you guys have probably had to deal with this a bit, so appreciate that. Flow of execution for a while loop is simple. Condition is evaluated. If it's true, it executes the body. If it's false, it skips it. So Wilbert, you are correct. A while loop is skipped if it's false, whereas a do while loop should only execute at least once. Plenty of infinite loops today. Yes, Antonio, you're not really a developer unless you've created at least one infinite loop. Trust me, it gets fun when you do an infinite loop and then you can't close it out, so your entire computer starts having a meltdown. All right. So here you can see how this let I equal 0, I is greater than 51, I++ can be rewritten as a while loop, which we already have right here. So instead of relying on the initial and update expression, as we do in a for loop, we have to manage the state of our loop manually. To do this before entering the loop, we create our variable I and initialize it to 0, which is the first number we want to print. It plays the same role as it would in a for loop. Every iteration will print I, then increment it to the next value. It will continue to iterate until the condition I is less than 51 evaluates to false. Okay. You can also read the while statement as if it were natural language. While I is less than 51, continue executing the body. So what would happen if we forget to include I++ at the end of the while loop? Simple. And Antonio's already said this. We get stuck with an infinite loop. I love infinite loops. They just never end. Yes, indeed. So we'll clear out our console. And beyond for loops, we stated earlier while loops are more flexible than for loops. Now we'll look at a sample that illustrates this. We have input validation, which is a huge thing. Prompts the user to enter a positive number, converting the input to a string to the number data type. As long as the number is not positive, then the user is prompted again within the body of the loop. As long as the user continues to input non-positive numbers, the loop will continue. So we can just copy and paste this over here. One thing that I kind of like doing better is just wrapping like this. And just undoing this right here. Okay. While num is less than or equal to 0. So if the number is less than or equal to 0, it will tell you invalid input. Please enter a positive number. Simple enough. So let's play this and let's do a 0. Invalid input. Please enter a positive number. And then we can do -1. Invalid input. -2. And then we do a +2. It just console.logs 2. Interesting question here. Why did it console.log our 2 if we never asked it to? I want you all to take that on as a homework assignment. Just do some research and see if you can figure out why. Infinite loops revisited. It's much simpler to create an infinite loop than an infinite while loop than it is to create an infinite for loop. So when we neglected to increment our I, it ended up sticking us in that infinite loop. And here, if we decrement instead of increment, that will also stick us in that infinite loop. And here, I have my saving grace. At some point, everyone creates an infinite loop. When this happens to you, typing Control-C will usually force the program to stop. Okay, good stuff. I also have the big stop button right here, so that helped out a lot. So, true or false, you can rewrite any for loop as a while loop. That's generally true. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's generally true. Now, let's continue down here. The following code contains an infinite loop. Which is the best explanation for why the loop doesn't terminate? Chat, can we get an answer in the chat, please? Is console.log in the question method? Okay. So I don't see console.log in the question method to your response, Wilbert, because I've just copied and pasted the exact same thing. But that's a good take on for you to go read the documentation. I always recommend at least giving it a once over to make sure that you're good and that you understand some of these finer points, because some of these points aren't really touched on, they're just understood. And I don't understand this point at all, so yeah. The reason to print it. Yeah, so that's one of those things that I would recommend that you look into the documentation. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and do that. Let's see. Let's do, what is that? Input.question. Okay. Let's see. Launch code for dummies. User input in Node.js. Okay, there's prompt sync. So that is weird. Okay, Node.js documentation. Yeah, so I would take that on as a to-do, just be so that we don't take too much time, because I know I'm already overrunning and adding an extra hour to your week, so I don't want to spend too much time on this when we're going to meet each other and discuss it on Thursday anyway. But for now, let's see. What did Antonio say for the answer to question 2? He said B. Answer starts at 1 and is incremented by n each time, so it will always be positive. Okay. Antonio, it's not necessarily B, because remember, answer is not a part of your while Boolean. The answer to this is actually A. N starts at 10 and is incremented by 1 each time through the loop, so it will always be positive. So according to this, as long as n is greater than 0, you will continue the loop. And here you are incrementing. If you had decremented, then you would be on the right track. But for this right here, that's the issue. Now, terminating a loop with break. JavaScript, let's see how much longer I'm keeping y'all here. 1, 2, yeah, okay, just 2 more. We're near the end here, y'all. So JavaScript, like most programming language, does provide a mechanism for terminating a loop before it would complete otherwise. The break keyword, when used within a loop, will immediately terminate the execution of any loop. Program execution then continues at the next line of code below the loop. So this loop executes 12 times for the values of I from 0 to 11. During the 12th iteration, I is 11, and condition I is greater than 10 evaluates to true for the first time, and the execution reaches the break statement. The loop is immediately terminated at that point. You can use them in for and while loops. So let's consider a situation where we're searching for a particular element in an array. We've seen that JavaScript has array methods that can carry out array searches, but some programming languages do not. We can use a while loop to say, while we have not reached the end of the array, continue iterating. Then we can include break with a conditional to check to say, when we have found the element we're searching for, exit the loop. So here, our sample is fairly simple. We would have an array of numbers where we'd be searching for 42, and we would begin our search at 0. While I is less than numbers.length, so however long this is, if whatever iter we're going through equals 42, break. So here you would stop, else you would just continue iterating through by adding 1, incrementing by 1. Then if I is less than the length of numbers, the value was located at index I, else the value was not in the array. That's the answer to part C. I'm assuming that that's the exercises. I'm not going to touch too deeply on the exercises because those are for y'all to do, but I'm glad to hear that you're having a breakthrough, Antonio. Love it, love it. All right, so let's continue. Notice that we use a while loop in the sample rather than a for loop. It's because our loop variable I is used outside of the loop. When we use a for loop the way we have been, the loop variable only exists within the loop. Fair enough. Here, I will only exist in the loop, whereas here, since we're declaring I outside of the loop, we don't have to worry about us not having access to it. All right, and the last piece that we'll be reviewing, choosing which loop to use. The for loop is typically used to iterate through a fixed set of values that can be determined before the loop executes. That's why we say that a for loop exhibits definite iteration. So this will be when you would know exactly how many values or how many sets your value will have. On the other hand, the while loop is more flexible, as we saw with the examples of validating user input. In that case, we can't determine in advance how many times. Say that last part again about I. I might have already skipped that part. Can you tell me which one you're referring to, Wilbert? The last part of the last section. Okay, we can go back. So, oh, okay, I see. So here it was saying, notice that we use a while loop in this example rather than a for loop. This is because of our loop variable I is used outside of the loop. So here we have to define which index of the array it was found in. Remember, in our for loop, since we declare for our I inside of our for loop, it will only live for this loop. Whereas here in a while loop, since I is declared up here, we can store information to it, we can access it, and we can use it outside of our while loop. Does that make sense? Perfect. All right, so we already know that a for loop is used to iterate through a fixed set of values that can be determined before the loop executes. So if we have an array that we know is like 5 values, then that's a definite array. On the other hand, the while loop is more flexible, as we saw with the sample of validating user input. In that case, we can't know how many times a user will input a value that cannot be accepted. So it will depend entirely on the values provided by the user during program execution. For this reason, a while loop is often described as an indefinite iteration. We expect that eventually the condition controlling it will evaluate to false and it will stop iterating, unless we have an infinite loop, which we've had a couple of tonight and we want to avoid those. While we saw that any for loop can be written as a while loop by manually creating and updating a loop variable, it's preferable to use a for loop when iterating over a collection or iterating a fixed number of times. Manually updating the variable in a while loop is more work for you, the programmer, and can lead to infinite loops if not handled properly. So check our understanding. We're asked to program a robot to move tennis balls from one box, box 1, to another box, box 2, one by one. The robot should continue moving balls until box number 1 is empty, and balls may be added to the box after the robot begins to work. What type of loop should we use to write the program? Waiting on y'all, chat. Okay, Wilbert says if you know the amount of balls, then the for loop. The only issue with that is, remember, here it says that balls may be added to the box after the robot begins its work. So what that means is there's a possibility that we can start with 8 balls and they can add 12 more. So this would be, in my opinion, a while loop, where while box is not empty, then empty, else don't empty, right? Question number 2, we're asked to write a program similar to the one above with a modification that the user may give the robot a specific number of balls to move from box 1 to box 2. You can assume there will always be more balls than the user has asked the robot to move. Which type of loop should you use to write the program? So if it is dynamic, then we use a while. So yeah, if the number can change or if we can't anticipate how much we will move, we will use that indefinite iteration, which would be a while loop. If we can anticipate exactly how many we'll go through or how much we need to move, we would use a for loop. So the answer to question number 1 would be A, while loop. And the question for question 2, it would be B, a for loop. And with that, I believe that we have finally hit the exercise portion of our evening. Unfortunately, I do believe that that is graded, so I can't hit too hard on that. What we will be doing is tomorrow we will be hosting office hours to just go through things and make sure. Wait, that's not the answer to part C. What part C are you referring to, Antonio? Question 3, part B. Construct a for loop that sorts the array 2, 3, blah, blah, blah into 2 new arrays. Define an empty array evens array to hold the even numbers and an odds array for the odd numbers. In the loop, determine if each number is even or odd, then put that number into even or odds as appropriate. So this one's the one you're talking about? Okay, so here I'm going to technically show you something that I probably shouldn't, but it is a powerful tool. And what we're looking at is modulo. This is kind of complicated in math, but to break it down for you, modulo will essentially divide a number by 2, and if it's divisible by 2, it will equal 0. If it's not divisible by 2, it will actually give you the remainder. So if I did 2 modulo 2, yeah. So if I did 2 modulo 2, and let's do modulo JS. Yeah. So 12 modulo 5. What this will do is this will divide 12 into 5 and only return the output, which would be 2. Here, negative 12 modulo 5, the remainder would be negative 2. 4 modulo 2 would be 0 because 4 can be divided into 2 twice. So one thing you can do is you can have a loop that for every number, it will do number modulo 2. If your answer is 0, you would know that it is an even number because it is divisible by 2. if your answer equals 1, then you would know that your answer is odd. Does that make sense? You can also do it with the update expression, and let's actually look at that as well. Yeah, so do me a favor, Antonio. Let's touch base on the update expression in Slack, and we'll go from there. Other than that, I mean, did this help at all? Is this a good format that we should repeat? Let me know if it is or if it isn't. Depending on the feedback, we could potentially continue this. We could potentially go back to Zoom or do it some other way. But yeah, and if y'all have any questions, feel free to Slack me. We will continue working on this and we'll go from there. Sound good? All right, that's what I'm talking about. All right, everybody. Well, I'm going to let y'all get to it and have a good evening. I've got some other stuff I need to attend to, and we will see y'all next time we decide to do this. Have a great one. Stay safe, and see you in class on Thursday. Thanks, Wilbert.